Tax reform, the top item on the agenda after Thanksgiving as Republicans gear up to hand President Trump a critical legislative victory. This is Outnumbered. I'm Dagan McDowell. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. And here today to take part in the fun, anchor of the intelligence report on the Fox Business Network, Trish Regan, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department, Marie Harf, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, Fox and Friends Weekend co-host, senior political analyst, and all-around good dude, Pete Hegseth. And you, my friend, are outnumbered.
Happy Thanksgiving. This is quite a Thanksgiving table.
Gobble, gobble.
I know.
Great to be here. I can smell the collective turkey of America right now.
We're not turkeys.
No, you guys aren't turkeys.
We'll all be
of
fat
you are
and happy
turkeys.
soon.
Exactly. Let's move on to something that could make us all a little bit fatter, or our pocketbooks.
Hopefully. Tax
Reform front and center on Capitol Hill. The Senate is expected to vote on its plan to rewrite the nation's tax code after Thanksgiving. The House already approving its version of a bill. At least one Republican is against the Senate plan as it stands now, and several others are on the fence. Republicans can only afford to lose 2 votes to get this through. The White House is confident it will get done. The House and Senate will have to reconcile their 2 bills before the final legislation goes to the president's desk to be signed into law. He says it will be a gift to the American people.
I want to congratulate the House of Representatives for passing a vital and historic tax cut last week, and I'm very hopeful the Senate will do the same very soon. We're going to give the American people a huge tax cut for Christmas. Hopefully that will be a great, big, beautiful Christmas present.
Pete, I want to get to the Senate. Again, the graveyard for the Obamacare repeal and replace. Senator Ron Johnson already upset that it doesn't do more for small businesses. Senator Susan Collins over the weekend was talking about, here are my list of requirements or my problems with the bill. Do you think they get it done?
I think they do get it done. Hopefully they do it with courage. Mitch McConnell has shown very little of that, in addition to not being effective in getting his caucus to get to 50 votes. The fact that Susan Collins' problem with the bill is the removal of the individual mandate. Fine, if you're a Republican and you believe in telling people to buy things, mandating that they buy things, how are you still a Republican? I don't think they should take the individual mandate out, and I think it's not a perfect tax cut, but if you can get those corporate rates down to 20%, do a little bit with the individual rates, man, if Republicans cannot coalesce around that, I think Ron Johnson comes on eventually. I think, and what you've got with Bob Corker and Jeff Flake and John McCain, they can actually help Mitch McConnell by giving Mitch McConnell a victory, even if it's also a victory for President Trump. You know, all those people that want to ditch Mitch, myself included, if Mitch gets this done, you walk back and say, hey, at least he got something serious done.
But this is a President Trump problem in a way, because there's some of these senators like Jeff Flake caught on an open mic talking about the president, Senator John McCain, who might not be willing to stand up and give the president of the United States a victory, even though it benefits the American people and American companies.
Yes, but I think it's more than just politics at this point. I think they could have done a better job with this bill. I think they had a huge opportunity, and there are things, at least on the individual side, that could have been better. They're really not giving Americans a tax cut. And guess what? Yes, they're giving corporations a tax cut, but high earners are going to pay the price for it. And so that's my problem with this. They promised, the president insisted that he would go after the fat cat private equity bankers on Wall Street. No one on Capitol Hill bothered to. Maybe that's the swamp at work, Pete.
Of course it is.
But I just think the president had very high aspirations for them and wanted them to do a lot to give Americans, average Americans, a tax break. And this does some good stuff, but it doesn't do a ton of good stuff. And so, you know, look, I'm greedy. I want more.
But it levels the playing field, Lisa, for American businesses. It puts us on a firmer footing when it comes to overseas countries. It reduces our corporate tax rate here for the very people who create jobs in this country. And it actually prevents cheating on your taxes, if you will, or shenanigans on the corporate side by encouraging, if you give us a 20% rate here, the industrialized world average, I think, is about 23%. We're not close to what Ireland taxes companies. It's 12.5%, but it still goes an incredibly long way to keep businesses here rather than moving overseas.
Well, of course. And, you know, that's the hope, to make the United States more competitive on the world stage. But you talk about corporations, and I think there is a concern for a lot of Republicans, particularly Senator Ron Johnson, who has mentioned that is a no as of right now for the way that small businesses are being treated, and the sentiment and the feeling that they are not getting the same break that corporations are getting. And this is not going to help enough small businesses, which is also why you had the National Federation of Independent Businesses come out against the House bill because of the way that pass-through income was being treated. So I think there is a concern there. And the difficulty for Republicans right now is the fact that the margins are slim, right? So, I mean, you can only lose 2 Republican senators. We already have Senator Ron Johnson as a no. I do think he'll come around depending on what they're willing to do with that. But then you also have Senators Lankford and Corker that have expressed concerns with the deficit aspect of this as well, adding to the national debt. You have Senator Susan Collins expressing concerns over the individual mandate. So there are still lingering concerns. And when you can only lose 2, that's some tough math that you're dealing with and you're up against.
But I find these senators, right and left, Democrat and Republican, the ones who don't like President Trump, grasping at straws, trying to find
also
reasons to dislike this. Susan Collins also didn't like the
either. And so
fair
I think
point.
those
There are some legitimate. I got to say
on a
something
few
in defense
bills,
of Senator Collins.
One of the states that's hardest hit
But
by
Senator
that very
Johnson
thing.
hasn't been a big critic of the president either. And so
Fair
I think
point.
those
There are some
legitimate.
legitimate. I got to say something in defense of Senator Collins here, because state and local taxes, any state that taxes income, any state that has high property taxes, Maine of which is one, you're not going to be able to deduct that anymore in this plan. And that's why I say that the individual is getting hurt. I fully 1,000% believe that there's no reason in the world that California or New York should be subsidized in any way by New Hampshire or Texas. However, Steve Forbes said to me yesterday, I think this is a very good point, we should be looking at another way to do this. Perhaps we say 2 years out, you're going to get rid of SALT, the ability to deduct state
Or you
and
deduct
local
a certain
taxes.
amount,
That way,
right? You can deduct
you
the
give
first
voters an
500,000.
opportunity to get rid of these guys ahead of it.
Here's what
It's
makes
gonna
me
hurt
crazy.
in the short run.
We are a Veruca Salt economy now. Every person is, I want it and I want it now. If I don't benefit from it, where's my tax cut? You know what? Bernie McGurk was on this sofa last week, and he said, I have horribly high taxes because he lives out on Long Island. And he said, for tax reform to really clean up or start to clean up what is a mess of the tax code, I'm willing to give that up.
Yes, and I was glad that he said that. The challenge is, and Trish is sort of alluding to this, the middle class isn't the obvious winner here. And just politically, President Trump did say this is going to be for the middle class. When you're running in the midterms, when you're running in 2020, the middle class has to be the center of these kinds of policies, and they're not now. And look, the White House said they were open to removing the individual mandate piece from the legislation. Well, I really think that's the only way you're going to get.
Middle class is getting a
slammed.
Susan
The
Collins.
Middle class is
are
getting
getting
a tax
slammed.
cut. You double
Not
the
in
standard.
10 years, they're not. At
rich
10
are getting
years.
slammed.
But the
Over
political
10 years, they're not. They'll be paying more
But
in
the political
taxes.
calculation is you make the corporate tax cut permanent because businesses will not change their decision making unless they can guarantee that they will have that tax cut down the road. The political calculation is that nobody in Congress will actually raise taxes on individuals, and they can make it permanent somewhere a few years out.
Sure.
Yeah.
But speaking of that, talking about the stock market and the benefit to the U.S. economy, the economy here at home soaring since Donald Trump took office earlier this year. Stocks setting one record after another. The Dow jumping a massive 28.5% overall during that time, gaining more than 5,000 points within the first year alone. The nation's GDP growing 3% or more in 2 quarters in a row since Mr. Trump's first year in the Oval Office, up from just under 2% in the first 2 quarters. Overall unemployment ticking down a bit to 4.6% in November of last year to 4.1% last month. But when it comes to wages, a new survey shows that more than half, 52%, a majority of workers did not get a raise over the last year. 38% did see a salary increase. 18% actually left their jobs for better paying ones. Trish Regan, We're firing on all cylinders right now, but people are counting on this tax reform getting done to keep the market going and to keep the economy growing at 3%.
Just to put this in perspective, the market, the S&P 500 is trading right now around 26 times earnings. This is one of the valuations investors look at.
Your big numbers.
Yeah, big numbers. Yeah. 26 times it's kind of expensive. The reason it's expensive, historically it trades at roughly 17. The reason it's so expensive is, as Dagan says, people anticipate that they will see a corporate tax reform. And corporate tax reform is very good for earnings because that means more in the way of revenues for these companies. And so I think that that's what this market is about. I think that there is an expectation that there will be more jobs if you bring all that money that's overseas. The president says $4 trillion. It had been estimated at 2.7. I think, he could be right. We don't know the exact number, and it could have a multiplier effect. So bringing that money back is good. It's healthy for America. I mean, we just keep going back, and I go back to it's not the middle class necessarily. They're not getting much of a benefit here, but it's even high earners. We're penalizing people that make a lot of money, and the people that make a lot of money are basically helping to subsidize these corporations. Some people may say, oh, that's fine. I think you don't want to destroy incentives for creating wealth.
Pete, the president loves taking credit for the stock market run.
Sure he does. Why wouldn't he want to? You create a lot of wealth. It is totally an investment on new tax reform, no doubt. But that survey is a little deceiving. It says 52% did not receive a salary increase in the last 12 months. Well, if 38% did and 18% left their job for a higher paying one, that means there are jobs, better jobs that people are seeking, and that number is at 56%. That's what we want in this country, the ability to climb the ladder. You may be flipping burgers at McDonald's right now, but in 10 years you could be a VP at a company in your town or elsewhere. Social mobility is what matters. That's why corporate tax rates are so important. You drag companies back into this country, you keep them there, you provide more jobs, you provide a ladder to success as opposed to the slide of dependency that takes people down. That's the difference of the philosophy of the Trump administration and the Obama administration. So tax reform, Republicans have to do it. And it's a political necessity for them at this point. Yes. If they can't even pass this, forget about it. They might as well just disband the party.
Marie,
I'll support that.
I'm sure you would.
I'm sure you would.
And the stock market's interesting. I am by no means an expert on this, but I do think that I've heard from folks that there may be a correction at some point, and that will be a healthy correction. And so the question will be how President Trump responds to that. You can't just take credit when it's high, and then if it maybe dips a little bit for very good economic reasons, what that will look
Lisa,
like.
I've said that. I've actually warned the president repeatedly because Ronald Reagan famously said after the '87 crash, stocks go up, stocks go down. He was very careful not to weigh in on the market. So the president's owning this record run on the way up. He's going to own it if there's a dip.
No, and that's a good point. And I think the president really came out the gate heavy on deregulation, sort of setting the premise with the Keystone Pipeline that he's going to be a pro-business president, which is great for optimism. Perceptions matter here. And we've seen that not only in, the National Federation of Independent Business, their surveys on optimism among small businesses, as well as the National Association of Manufacturers, if I could talk on this Thanksgiving. But clearly there's a lot of optimism. So, you're right about wanting to be a little bit careful about the ups and downs, particularly depending on what happens with tax reform.
Yeah. Optimism actually does lift an economy. Thank you, guys. Democrats sounding more and more confident about taking back congressional seats in the midterms after a couple of wins in Virginia and New Jersey. Many hoping to capitalize on opposition to the president. Can they do it? Or is that the wrong approach? And President Trump wants to do away with a program that at least one terrorist used to get in this country. We'll debate whether it's time to end the so-called diversity visa program.
With the midterms less than a year away, Democrats have been expressing more confidence after election wins in Virginia and New Jersey earlier this month. They're hoping to capitalize on opposition to President Trump to take back the House next year. But Wall Street journalist columnist Gerald Saab says Democrats may be blowing their shot by not making moves to win back working-class voters that Hillary Clinton failed to get in 2016. Saab writing, quote, Democrats can miss their chance by deciding that simply running against an unpopular president is sufficient and failing to come up with an economic message that recaptures the kinds of voters they lost to Mr. Trump last year. On that same column, Ohio Democrat Tim Ryan, who's seen as more of a centrist in the party, agrees that Democrats need to sharpen their economic message. Ryan also agreed that Republicans would run a campaign painting Pelosi as a far-left leader of the party. But he also countered that Republicans have some less than popular leaders as well. Marie, I want to start with you on this. This was a problem with Hillary Clinton, that failing to capture working class voters. Clearly, Democrats were excited about the wins in Virginia and New Jersey. But do you worry that, they're overreaching or, kind of a little bit overexcited, considering the fact that a lot of these House districts don't look like places in Northern Virginia?
Well, look, 2018, I can't believe we're less than a year out already. This is crazy. On the Democratic side, we have a lot of enthusiasm. We have candidates who are targeted to their districts and their states, which is very important. We saw that be very helpful in Virginia. We have enthusiasm with fundraising, with organizing. And President Trump's numbers are at a historic low. So, look, in any midterm, the incumbent party usually loses seats. So a lot of the winds are blowing in the right direction here. We need 24 seats to take back the House. There are 23 districts where there are Republican incumbents. Hillary Clinton won those districts. It will not be easy or a slam dunk by any means, but I think Democrats have realized that we need to find candidates who match the districts. We have so much enthusiasm, and midterms are generally good for a party out of power.
They are, but they've also been, at least in the past, good for Republicans as well, Pete.
When we were in power.
What do you make of
the traditional political rule book was long since thrown away as far as what voters necessarily respond to.
We'll see.
We'll see. We will see. You talk about, I don't think the president's ratings are at historic lows. They've actually stabilized. His supporters have not left him despite an unrelenting.
That's lower than any other president this time in his presidency.
Depends on what polls you're looking at. There's other tracking polls that have it up in the 40s now.
That's still at historic lows at this point in a first term.
Depending on how you want to define it, doesn't matter. I'm saying Trump supporters haven't left him. Enthusiasm will be key. They'll have to run on obstinance and obstacles from both establishment Republicans and Democrats. You talk about candidates tailored to their districts. The code for that is we'll do whatever our leadership wants. We're just going to run a candidate that can get elected. And it's famously what the Democratic Party is. It's a
Doesn't every party run to get elected?
No, the Democratic Party is a series of grievances, whether it's class warfare, gender identity politics, racial identity politics. That is what it's devolved into. There is no economic strategy because there is no economic strategy other than take from rich people and give to other people. The Democratic Party is a socialist party.
Right.
So
that's what it's become,
that's exactly where it's become.
I'm going to jump in and just point out, historically, it was not always that way.
But
JFK, everyone, Marie, he cut taxes.
JFK would be a conservative Republican today.
He absolutely would, but that's what they need to get back to. They need to get back to their roots. They need to get back to the middle-class worker. This is what they need. And you know what? Hillary Clinton took them so far off. I've said over and over again, she was the let-them-eat-cake candidate. Nancy Pelosi's of that school as well. They need that Tim Ryan. They need that Joe Biden-esque
This is what they're going to do with that Tim Ryan. Push it right off the stage.
Because
President Trump captured that and took it away from him.
But the point of the column as well is the fact that it's going to be difficult for Democrats with, as you mentioned, a charged-up progressive base, but also trying to win some of these districts that may be a little bit more blue-collar. Some of these voters that Hillary Clinton had a difficult time connecting with, that failed to connect with. So what do you make of that, Dagan?
I think that if you read the Jerry Seib column, that some of the ideas that Tim Ryan talks about are government health care, single-payer health care. So, to your point, that's not fully socialized medicine, but it's a big step toward doing that. And, by the way, Medicare going broke in less than 12 years, something that nobody is fixing. So, we're going to take that nationwide. Idiocy. The earned income tax credit, that's income redistribution. That's taking from wealthier people who already bear the large burden of paying taxes in this country and creating even more people in this country who not only don't pay any tax, which is about half of people in the nation right now, but increasing that number to people who get money back from the government without ever paying a dime in. And then the $15 minimum wage, which is not what people want.
So I'm going to apologize to Marie and say it's not socialism, it's democratic socialism.
Well, and we've got to move on. And also, real quick, there's also 12 Democrats in congressional districts where President Trump won, as well as 10 Senate Democrats who are running in races that President Trump won as well. So we'll see what happens very early. New concerns about the diversity lottery program, which allowed the terrorist accused of killing 8 people in New York City last month to get into the country. Details ahead. Plus, a Homeland Security undercover probe reportedly exposing major failures at our airports. We'll debate what should be done now to keep Americans safe. Lawmakers were briefed on the investigation findings earlier this month. Stay tuned.
Quite frankly, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we found that briefing disturbing. We need to do more to confront the growing threats aimed at the aviation sector.
President Trump says he wants to end the so-called diversity visa program, a lottery for immigrants from nations with low rates of immigration to the U.S. It's the same program a terrorist from Uzbekistan used to come into this country before killing 8 people driving a truck down a bike path in New York City last month in Lower Manhattan. Now, new State Department numbers are raising eyebrows about the diversity visa program. Since 2007, nearly 30,000 foreigners have come into the U.S. from 3 state sponsors of terror: Iran, Sudan, and Syria. Many of them, of course, trying to escape terrorism. But the White House has reportedly released statistics showing that the New York City bike path killer is the latest of at least 6 foreign terrorists to enter the U.S. through visa lotteries since 1997. One of them, an Egyptian national who opened fire in Los Angeles International Airport back in 2002, killing 2 ticket agents and wounding 3 others. Pete, on this note, we should point out that because President Trump has gone after Chuck Schumer on this, who was had a role in creating the diversity visa program, but he was also in favor of getting rid of it as part of the Gang of 8 overall immigration reform. So do we need to jettison this program?
Of course, and Schumer was willing to get rid of it because he's a horse trader at the end of the day. America is a very diverse country. Fantastic. We don't need a visa lottery program to make it more diverse at this point. This is why President Trump won. This is what he understands. It's simple common sense. You should choose the people that come to your country. You should be careful about the refugees that they let in, and when they come in, make sure that they assimilate. And if you aren't staying here for the right reasons, then you should go home. It's actually really straightforward, and Republicans should continue to take cues from this president on how to handle legal and illegal immigration, including the problem of chain migration, which is once you come, you can sponsor all your friends and family, and they're coming too. And maybe the vetting and the intentions of those coming are not as pure as we would like.
Lisa, there had been warnings by government agencies going back to 2007. There was a government accountability office warning that this visa program was vulnerable to manipulation and fraud risk. A few years later, 2011, Congressional Research Service reported vulnerable to fraud. The diversity visa program misuse, it could be used as an avenue for terrorists. So all along the way, there have been warnings about misuse of this program.
And we should listen to it and get rid of it. This program makes 0 sense. And we saw recently with 4 Somali-born individuals who essentially lied about being family members to exploit chain migration. So, I mean, there clearly are concerns here. We're also talking about Iran. The world's largest state sponsor of terrorism is the 3rd largest recipient of this program. 30% of the individuals who have won the lottery are from terrorist sponsoring countries. So I really don't know the point of this. And quite frankly, I think that Republicans should make this as part of a larger plan when we get to DACA, particularly looking at the RAISE Act, which Senators Cotton and Perdue introduced and President Trump has also endorsed. I think they should make that a part of any conversation regarding DACA, personally.
Because we already have programs that help people flee war-torn countries, or allies of ours that fought on the battlefield.
Wants to end.
And for good reason, probably, on a lot of levels, absolutely. And the ones that should work don't work, like bringing interpreters back from Iraq and Afghanistan.
You don't think the SIV program works?
No, I was just about to praise it.
Oh, good.
I had to fight. Whew. No. It's a terribly implemented program. It's a great program.
Okay.
It took me 4 years, 3 appeals, and 2 members of Congress to get 2 guys that I fought with against Al-Qaeda with.
Yep.
It's terribly implemented. But why in the world are we getting randomly lottery folks from countries like this?
It doesn't make any sense. It absolutely doesn't. I mean, this is an example of government trying to, diversity for immigration. I get it. We're a diverse country, as you said earlier. But it doesn't make any sense at all to say, okay, just because we want people from Afghanistan, we don't have enough people from Afghanistan, so here you go, you won the lottery, you're coming to the United States of America. No, that's not what it's about. We want people that are going to come here, that are going to work hard, that are going to embrace everything that has made this country great. How many people do you know? I think about my husband's family, that they were Italian and they came here, and the grandparents didn't want to speak Italian in front of the kids because, oh gosh, you shouldn't learn Italian, you should learn English. I mean, of course you should learn as many languages as you can, but there was a different attitude back then, completely different. And now people don't want to assimilate anymore. It's not great to be American. That's wrong.
But what is the point of it, Marie? Because I feel like Democrats are hard pressed to defend it. I've not heard any Democrat come up with a reasonable answer as to why we should keep this in place.
And Democrats have argued for getting rid of it in the past. So I'm not going to sort of tie my horse to this program. What I would say is that the random nature of it doesn't mean people aren't vetted. Now, they may not be vetted well enough. We may need to improve that.
On that note, 9.4 million qualified entries were in the lottery in 2015.
A very small percentage of people who actually applied for this program got visas. So I think what we all can agree on is that people who come here through whatever program are vetted. We know who they are. We're looking at their social media, and that we should welcome people who are like refugees, for example, fleeing some of this terrorist violence.
We agree also that they need to assimilate, learn English, be a part of our culture.
Well, I think the question about what assimilate means is probably where things
you know what I do at least once a month? I take the test for citizenship. That you can do sample tests online.
Yes, you can.
You've got a lot of extra time on your hands.
I love doing it and sitting in the back of a cab because, again, it does make you, it does kind of reinforce your pride.
Go. All right. Speaking of all this and the importance of assimilation, there's security concerns that are fueling all of it. And we're thinking about this on a day like today, Thanksgiving, as Americans travel for the holidays. There's all this concern out there about airport safety. This month, House lawmakers reportedly received a classified briefing on a recent Homeland Security Department undercover probe showing that the TSA routinely failed to spot threats like knives, guns, and explosives.
Oh, great.
Well, that makes you feel good, right? Some reports say the failure rate was as high as 70 to 80%. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Michael McCall called the briefing disturbing, to say the least, saying we must do more to upgrade airport security. Here he is. Watch.
Cannot solve this problem alone. Working with the private sector, we need to find ways to meet our security needs. These partnerships can produce new and innovative technologies that can advance our screening process, including the use of biometrics like fingerprints and facial recognition.
The DHS report gave the TSA 8 classified recommendations to correct the vulnerabilities. The TSA's administrator says they're taking the findings seriously, and they are now testing new scanning equipment that shows 3D images of bags. I got to tell you guys, we have all the technology in the world, right? And yet we don't use it. We allow rates like this 70 to 80% of the time. Things like explosives can get through the TSA. Come on.
But they look at my cell phone charger.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
and my little shampoo bottle.
Or my products, I know.
Exactly. I mean, first of all, we always have to remember that intelligence and being on the offense is way better than being in a scanner and being on the defense. Yeah. So remembering the threats that we face and going after them aggressively and the way this president has untied the hands of people, I think is really important. Second of all, you can have all the technology you want, but you ultimately usually have a human behind that screen reading it and looking at it and analyzing it. You talk about 70 to 80% failure rate. My home airport in Minneapolis had a 95% failure rate back in July. That's why the acting TSA director was let go. Think about Minneapolis. It's the home of members of the local Muslim Somali community who went to go fight with al-Shabaab, who went to go fight at ISIS at some of the highest rates in the country. Yet they're missing 95% of the time. It's mortifying. I mean, it's when big government bureaucracies run security. Those are the kind of outcomes you get.
Yeah, security, we must point out, was in private hands before 9/11.
Yes.
It was President Bush who nationalized airport security.
You're right.
When people start talking about privatizing it, there are public-private partnerships in a number of airports in this country, like San Francisco, for example. You have the role of private contractors there. Maybe that's something we do. CT scanners, replacing the bag scanners with actual CT scans. There's a pilot program the TSA is rolling out. I think it's in 2 airports so far. But I want to point this out. You know the ticket fee that you pay for airport security?
Oh, God.
The TSA budget is about $7.6 billion every year. It's not that much. $1.3 billion in recent years from the fee you pay for security goes to pay down the deficit. Well, it goes to deficit reduction, not airport security. So that fee that you get hit with, some of it's not being used for security.
And here's the reality, though. Lisa, let me just ask you. I mean, you look at a country like Israel, and they have done a phenomenal job on airport security, as they've kind of had to.
Much smaller, too.
They are smaller, but they're using a lot of technology that we theoretically could use here, and we could employ better people, to Pete's point.
And not to mention, as well, that we recently learned because of the Israelis and hacking into an ISIS cell bomb maker cell finding out that they were trying to use laptops, explosives in laptops, to fool airport X-ray systems and down international planes. So, I mean, these are real concerns that we have as a country and as well as internationally. And we know that the terrorists are trying to be on the cutting edge of this with technology. They're actively working on ways to smuggle explosives in on planes to fool our current technology that we have. Clearly, they're continuing to miss the mark. So, we should be staying on top of it. We shouldn't let them be more cutting edge than we are being in protecting Americans.
And how about those bomb sniffing doggies? There are more than 1,000 bomb sniffing dog teams out there. So that also
and they're more effective too, oftentimes.
Yeah, they very are.
You're right.
Well, a Thanksgiving tradition in danger this year. Millions of Americans may be tuning out today's slate of NFL football games.
I know my Vikings right now. Right now.
All because the players are taking a knee during the anthem. The long-lasting impact from this and whether anything can be done to fix it.
Thanksgiving is a big day for eating and for football, as Pete is clapping. But in many homes, the TV may be off, as many Americans are fed up with players kneeling during the national anthem and are turning their backs on America's most popular sport. And images like this won't help. NFL star Marshawn Lynch, number 24, during last Sunday's game in Mexico City, sitting during the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner, but standing for the Mexican national anthem. Like prior protests, this drew a fiery reaction from President Trump. He tweeted, "Great disrespect. Next time the NFL should suspend him for the remainder of the season. Attendance and ratings way down." Speaking of which, the NFL getting an earful from major sponsors anxious over the decline in ratings, especially since the president made this an issue. Veteran NFL broadcaster Al Michaels appears to agree, telling Philly.com, quote, "Once the president made these remarks in Alabama, at that particular point, it was like throwing a match into a gas tank. During the offseason, both sides just have to sit down and figure out a way to make this a situation where it doesn't overwhelm the conversation about the NFL." So Pete, it's tough as for a lot of Americans, who want
yoga breathing over here.
I know he's freaking out a little bit.
He's been calming me down.
I know.
No, but I mean, it's really tough to understand the heart of this when you have a player like Marshawn Lynch kneel during the Star-Spangled Banner, but stand up to the Mexican anthem, considering the fact that, you don't want to talk about injustice in the criminal justice system. Look no further than a corrupt place like Mexico.
Yeah, ask
What are
Andrew
your thoughts
Tamarici.
on that? How do you make sense of that?
Well, Marshawn Lynch is an idiot. I mean, he doesn't understand why his country affords him all these opportunities. He may have been treated really nicely in Mexico because he's a millionaire football player. Walk off into any other number of cities and commit a crime and see what happens to you that way and how fairly you're treated and whether the rule of law really exists. This issue is so visceral because I love football.
Who doesn't?
And I love
I love
our
college
country.
football.
I love professional football. And my Vikings are 8-2 this year, and they're playing right now. And I have created an exception because no single Viking has kneeled all year long. And so because they haven't kneeled, I've watched only that game and not the other NFL. I think a lot of people have carved out their boycott niche, but I usually watch a lot of NFL, and I've really reined that in. I imagine right now over Thanksgiving tables, you've probably got people that still watch and don't watch, and football's on, and they want to watch, and they don't want to watch. It's the frustrating part is that politics now have invaded these wonderful sports that we play, and players don't have perspective on
and
that.
it's in everything. And Marie, just real quick, do you support the protests that are going on?
I support their right to do it. I support their right to do it. Wait, let me finish. I support their right to do it, and I think we should talk about the issues they're trying to raise awareness about.
The point of that, Marie, is actually the question I wanted to ask you, so I'm glad you got to that for me. But, okay, so for these players, can you name what are three changes that they actually want to see get accomplisted?
Well, I think they would all have
policy changes. What are they actually angling for?
They would all have
things.
They would all have a different answer to that. I think at a meta level, they want there to be a conversation, a real conversation in this country about police brutality against minorities of color. Okay, this may not be the way you think they should be going about doing it, but I want to go back to what Al Michaels said, because I actually thought I want to take it out of sort of the day-to-day conversation on this. In the off season, the players need to sit down, the owners, the coaches, the league. Roger Goodell, I actually think, has tried to...
No, Roger Goodell's been terrible.
Well, no, but wait. Let me finish what I was saying, though. He actually understands that he can't just ignore the players. He has to at least say, Let's find a
Right now
way
he's ignoring the fans.
to talk about it. Well, so we need to sit down in the off season, take it out of the politics. The president needs to stop weighing in on it and say, how can we fix this before next season?
Let's just admit that the original protesters, starting with Colin Kaepernick, it was about police brutality.
Yes.
But more lately, it's protesting Donald Trump. It's protesting the president of the United States because of the comments that he made about firing the NFL players and what he called them, you know what, SOBs. But why don't we point out the players who are standing? On Salute to Service night on Monday Night Football, every single Seattle Seahawk stood, including Michael Bennett. Let's talk about the fact that very few players are kneeling now. I think that we do owe them that this seems to be something
social
that they
pressure
are.
has worked at some level.
Maybe it's social pressure. Maybe they're realizing that, hey, if it's Salute to Service night, I'm going to salute our men and women who are protecting this country and keeping us free by standing.
To Dagan, well, real quick, I want to get Trish in here. So to Dagan's point, and Marie, to talk about the reaction to President Trump, in some degree, do you think he forced this issue and sort of, Dagan points out that less people are kneeling.
He pointed out
that
the
a response
obvious.
to
I think he pointed out what everyone in the United States of America was feeling. That was obvious. I don't know how you don't hear that song. And, I've told you before, I was a former singer, and every time I sing it, every time I hear it, I get goosebumps. And it's part of what we were saying earlier in the show, that, assimilation and being in America is being proud of your country as an American. And that's part of it. So I think he said what everybody was thinking, and I think it was these players and the inability of Goodell to do what he needed to do that gave it so much steam.
Yeah.
Well, and we should all be proud to be Americans. And we're heading into the giving season. But a new survey finds nearly 7 in 10 people said that they will skip exchanging gifts if family and friends were okay with it. What they do with their time and money instead. You're going to want to watch this. And I do like it.
Been an angel all year, Santa baby, so hurry down the chimney.